Hi friends, it's me here to read another story called Celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day with Mrs. Park's Class, written by Alma, Flor, and illustrated by Isabel, Campoy. Mrs. Park's class is getting ready to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Lupe, your drawing of Dr. King turned out really well, the teacher says. What are we going to put on this part of the mural, Nelson asks. Here's where I'll write his famous statements. I have a dream, Jorge recites. And here we'll put our dream, says Jessica. But I still don't know what mine will be. I know mine, says Rob. I want Joe to be my friend. Who knows why we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the teacher asks. Because he wanted all of us to be able to go to school together, Rob answered. And ride the same buses, Nelson said. And everyone to get the same pay for the same work, added Jessica. Later, Mrs. Park's class goes out to the garden. As they water the plants, they talk to each other. We have flowers of every color. Yes, they are yellow, red, blue, white. Then they fertilize the trees and look at them. There are all kinds of different leaves. Some are very thin, some are round, others are pointy. Shh, be quiet. Do you see that woodpecker, says Mrs. Park. Look, a sparrow, said Nelson. And here's a hummingbird, said Jessica. Our garden is so pretty, Lupe exclaims. That's true, Rob adds. I think it's because it has so many different colors and shapes. Hey, shouts Jorge. That reminds me of the things Martin Luther King said. I have an idea, and he whispers to his teacher. That's a great idea, exclaimed Miss Park. But we have to start working on it right away so that it'll be ready for tomorrow. Just like the flowers in the garden of every color, and the trees in the forest of different sizes, and the birds in the sky, each one different. That's how we all are. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed that we would all share the planet, respecting and appreciating our differences. He struggled to make everyone understand, and now we all have to work together to make his dream come true. Who was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? This is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin was born in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia on January 15th, 1929. When Martin was a boy, African-American children like him couldn't go to the same school as other children. At the movies and on buses, African-American people had to sit in different areas. They couldn't eat in the same restaurants or shop in the same stores as other people. They weren't allowed to live in the same neighborhoods either or play in the same parks. This was called racial segregation. From the time he was very young, Martin thought that this was unfair. He decided that things had to change. He decided he would help to change them. The Constitution says that all people are created equal, but Martin saw that African American citizens didn't have the same rights as others. Martin traveled all over the country. He explained to African American people that it was a serious problem. He told them not to be afraid to protest and ask for changes. He encouraged them to stand up for their rights. But he told them to do it in a peaceful way. He didn't want them to use violence, insults, or weapons. African American people began to march and ask for changes. Martin and his wife, Coretta, marched too. One day, an African American woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger. Because of this, she was arrested. Then African American people decided not to ride the buses. They did this for 382 days. It was their way of complaining so that things would change. They did all this without using violence, following the ideas of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin was able to get the support of many white leaders, but many people didn't like what he was doing. They stalked and threatened him. They also threatened his family. They put him in jail about 20 times. But Martin never gave up in because he was sure he was doing a very important thing. Finally, things began to change. In 1956, the Supreme Court ended segregation on buses because it was against the Constitution. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. This law ended segregation in schools. It also created programs to help poor people and African American communities. Martin Luther King Jr. showed that you don't need to use violence to make things change. Martin believed violence doesn't help solve problems. It only creates new problems that could be even bigger and more serious. These ideas made him famous all over the world. For this reason, he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. It's a very important award that's given to people who work for peace. Martin Luther King Jr. is a very important person in the history of the United States. That's why his birthday is a national holiday. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is celebrated on the third Monday of January with special activities in schools, universities, churches, and public places all over the country. And that is who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, my friends. Ask your teacher to learn more. Thanks for joining me.